Was thinking, Mordechai had asked a few days ago about gluing back your pitum onto your esrog to make it kosher. And so this is, of course, a very interesting topic because one of the easiest things to break off of the esrog is the pitum. And that's what, especially as a child, as everyone remembers, the biggest thing they had to be careful was not to drop the esrog and break off the pitum. That was the worry of everyone that the pitum might fall off. And so this is what's beautiful about the way we're learning the Gemara is that we get to know the different opinions of the commentaries, how they're seeing the Gemara. And then when you learn the Shulchan Aruch, you have an understanding of where it's coming from. Why is the Shulchan Aruch paskening? Why is it following this view? Why is it saying this? It must be because it's following this view. Or why is it permitting that? It must be because it's following that view. So you only get to see the beauty of it if you learn the Gemara and if you learn the commentaries on the Gemara to see how they learned how they understood the flow of the Gemara. So we're going to talk a little about the concept of the pitum breaking off, and if there's any way of permitting it. So, what is the reason why, if the pitum falls off, what's the reason why it is invalid? What invalidates it? What's the logic behind it? In other words, what's the halacha problem with the pitum? That fact that the pitum falls off, why is that considered invalid? So we have the Mishnah Brewer brings down that the problem with the pitum falling off, I mean, it's brought in the commentaries, seems to be two problems. The one problem is that it's chaser, it's missing. If the pitum falls off, you're gonna be it's called a chaser. It's called an esrog that's missing something. Now, an esrog that's missing something, it's considered that it's not a lekicha tama. It's not complete taking, and therefore it would be invalid on the first day of Sukkot. Why on the first day of Sukkot is that a problem? Because on the first day of Sukkot, we have all the laws of the Torah have to be met. On the other days of Sukkot, it's a rabbinic law. Not everything that is obligated in the Torah did the rabbis enforce and say you have to keep that for the other days of Sukkot. They didn't include it in their obligation always. And one of those differences between the first day and the other days of Sukkot is something that's missing. If the esrog, you have an esrog, according to the Torah law, which is the first day is the mitzvah, according to the mitzvah in the Torah, it's a biblical mitzvah. For that day, the Torah says, L'kicha tama. For the other days was as we learned before, it's a commemoration of what they did in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So we take the lulav and esrog as a commemoration. What leniency is there when the rabbis told us to do this as a commemoration? So one of the leniencies is that if it's cluster, if it's missing something, and that is going to be an exemption, that's going to be a permit. That in the other days of Sukkot, you don't have to be so machmir if it's chaser, if it's missing something, it's okay. The Ramah brings this really, and he brings it. He says, the chaser kosher b'shar yamim. If it's missing something, this is in chapter 649 of the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah is the source of all Ashkenazic halachic rulings. the Ramah, he brings in this chapter 649, he brings that chaser is kosher b'shar yomim, that chaser, something that's missing in the esrog, is kosher on the other days of Sukkot, not the first day. V'nital pit masa yoy uktzai, if the pitum or the ukitz, the pitum is the thing on top, the ukitz is the thing. If that's missing, it's dinoi kechaser v'kosher b'miyom rishon ve'elach. Its halacha is that it's if it's missing, that is going to be kosher on the other days of Sukkot. It's only the first day that you're going to mess it up. This is the Ramah. The Ramah adds that, however, if it's missing because a mouse bit it, then it has a different problem because it's considered disgusting. So if the pitum falls off, according to the Ramah, it's fine on the other days of it's kosher on the other days of Sukkot. So we make such a big deal out of it. The Ramah says, by the way, if it's after the first day of Sukkot, missing it's pitum, don't worry, it's kosher. And so that's the Ramah. It's a problem of chaser. And as we've learned, chaser is a problem only on the first day of Sukkot, not on the other days of Sukkot. Now, outside of Israel, of course, we have to realize that the second day of Sukkot sometimes is considered like the first day. So it could be outside of Israel that the second day would be considered an issue. There could be leniencies for the second day, and there might be leniency on the second day or not. It's mentioned in Shulchan Aruch 2 opinions. So I'm not going to get into that now, but the concept that it's kosher for the rest of Sukkot is correct, according to the Ramah. However, there is another way of looking at it, that the problem of a pitum falling off is not because it's missing something and you don't fulfill the lakicha tama. It's not complete taking. The problem is that it's not beautiful anymore. It's an esrog that has damage to it. And the fact that it's damaged, not because a mouse bit it, which everyone agrees with could be an issue of mios, disgusting. This is an issue of the fact that it's not a beautiful esrog anymore. And if the pitum falls off, it could be a problem of hadar. And if that's the understanding, if the problem of the pitum falling off is a problem that is not beautiful, so when it comes to hadar, then we have a big debate among the poskim. There's a big debate if the beauty of an esrog is the law of the beauty of an esrog. When does that law apply? Most of the commentaries seem to say that hadar, when it comes to beauty, that's about the entire sukkah needs to be fulfilled in a way of hadar. It has to be beautiful. The Rambam is known for his unique view that hadar only applies on the first day of Sukkot and not on the other days. In other words, we say that chaser is only an issue on the first day, not on the other days. The Rambam says hadar also. Hadar only is only an issue on the first day, not on the other days of Sukkot. Now, the Mishnah Berurah brings, he says, if the pitum is broken off, the Ramah just paskin that on the other days of Sukkot, not the first day, we're not going to discuss the second day, but the other days of Sukkot, if the pitum falls off, the Ramah paskin, it's kosher. The Mishnah Berurah comes along and says that the Magen Avraham brings that yesh poskim that hold, there are opinions that hold that if the pitum is broken off, it's a problem of hadar. It's a problem of beautiful, not because it's missing. It's a problem of beautiful. Problem of beautiful, that could be a problem even on the other days of Sukkot. And he says, Therefore, you shouldn't be lenient if the pitum breaks off all 7 days. However, if you can't find another esrog, you could rely on the lenient views. So what are the lenient views? What are you relying on if you don't have another esrog and all you have is one that the pitum broke off? What are the leniencies here? So number one, you have the leniency of the Ramah, that the problem of an esrog breaking off is called chaser. It's missing something. That's the issue. And if that's the issue, it only applies on the first day. And the other days of Sukkot, you could be lenient. That would be fine. What about if you hold the problem is hadar? Beautiful. What are the leniencies now? How could you, what are you relying on to permit this esrog on the other days of Sukkot if the problem is hadar is beautiful? So here you have the opinion of the Rambam that that the other days of Sukkot, you could hold, you could say that hadar only applies on the first day. But on the other days of Sukkot, it could be kosher according to that opinion of the Rambam. And there are other opinions that agree with the Rambam. The Mishabur brings that Roiv HaPoiskim Seivrim Rambam. Interesting. We in the Gemara we find the common understanding is that it's hadar is all 7, but there are other opinions that hold like the Rambam. I believe the Ran and the Ritva maybe agree with the Rambam. The Mishabur seems to say Roiv HaPoiskim hold like the Rambam. That's interesting. That even those that passel that passel it that make it invalid because of hadar, it would be kosher on the other days. So you could even make a bracha, he says, if you have nothing else but some question about the bracha. Therefore, if you could come up with a if there's any extra leniency that you could find, then maybe then you could say the bracha. And he brings you back to chapter 648. This is 649, and 648 is where he says, take a look over there, and Sif Zion in the Mishnah Brura. So over there in Sif Zion, he says if the dad, which is the Roish HaKoton Sheshantoi, if it was taken off, the dad where the Shoshana is, it's puzzle, and some are machmir, even if the Shoshanta, just the scab on top of the Ramah says the scab on top is removed. And toiv lahachmir b'makom she'efshar, it's good to be machmir in a place where you're able to, and you can find another esrog instead. But if it is missing, you don't have to be. If you could find something more beautiful than it, fine. But if this is the most beautiful, you don't have to worry if just the shoshanta was removed, just the tip on top. He says, but if it's also some of the fleshy part of the pitum, then you should really try to find another esrog, because some people are machmir. But anyway, he says, Ein lifsal ela imkain nitel hadad, dainu ha'etz, shavreish ha'pitma alav. He says, le'inyan dina, you can't passel it unless the dad, which is where the roish ha'pitma, where the pitum comes out of, shavreish ha'pitma alav, ha'reish nikra sheshanta, only if the actual pitum is removed. And this is and then he says this only applies if it's an esrog that never had a pitum. There are many esrogim that grow without pitums. Those are not an issue.
Rabbi,
Now, yes.
I think actually the pitum is inside on those. It's not that there's no pitum. There's not an external pitum. The pitum is inside.
Well, the Shulchan Aruch talks about it, and the Torah talks about it, and they mention that the pitum, um, that they use this term that some grow without it, and some it falls off before it's picked. Um, yeah, it's this is the term used. I don't have an esrog tree. I don't know, but there definitely is a part that falls off in a lot of these. Um, so it says, like for example, it's only puzzle if it's nitla, but if dad me oilam, if it didn't have a this pitum ever, then it's kosher. In the majority of esrogim are like this, he says, and the Mishabura says this is the way it was from when it was created, and this is the way it grows. You don't call it chaser or not beautiful, and it's recognizable because there's a certain type of a dip that's in the in the esrog that's there from when it's formed, and that is the term. And then the Beis Yosef on the Torah, which I saw, I looked it up. He mentions that even when it falls off, it's also kosher, and that's not a problem. I'm sure the Mishabura at some point probably brings that. I don't see it right here.
Maybe I'm getting mixed up with something else. I had heard that there's a pitum, but it's internal instead of external.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've
Yeah,
ever
that I'm
seen
not
that
I'm not
in the.
familiar with that term that
Okay.
that we call it that it has its pitum because I mean it does fall off. I mean that's a fact. Um,
Also, I wanted to
yeah,
ask you regarding the word nitla. It says it was removed. It,
right.
um, it's usually it's not a question of removed. It's a question of broken off. Removed sounds like it's something that a person does willingly, and
Yeah,
broken off is like unintentional.
right. So the reason it's using the word nitla is that it's trying to emphasize, and this is important that it's using that word nitla, not that it doesn't have it. That's the main emphasis, that it's nitla, that it was taken off, and not that it never had it in the first place.
Please
Because if
spell
it
it.
never had
Please.
it in the first place, or if it fell off before it was picked, because it's part of the nature of that esrog that it falls off, that those type of esrogim, those are kosher, specifically in a case where it was removed either because of breaking off or because someone chose to cut it off. That would be the case of nitla pitmasai. It is interesting because this law, our Gemara is comparing it to trephos, where of animals, and there are laws about a treifa, an animal that had certain limbs cut off. If a limb is cut off, it's generally called a treifa. However, in Shulchan Aruch, in laws of treifas, it also talks about what happens if it was born without a certain limb. The same exact type of case as here. And over there, it turns out that it's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Rashba, about limbs, that it was born if it was born without them. So this concept of nitla pit masay by the esrog, we do find a very similar thing by the laws of the animals that are called trephos. If it was born without such a limb, the Rambam holds it's kosher. Similar to here with the esrog, that if it's an esrog that doesn't have a pitum in the first place, it would be kosher. And the interesting thing is, over there we actually paskin that you have to be machmir, like the Rajba, that you should, even if it's born, never had a limb, certain limb, we try not to, we consider it a treifa. Here, why in esrog, we don't seem to follow that. We seem to hold that the esrogim that don't have pitums, they are acceptable. Even you don't have to try to find one with a pitum. Although there is a big discussion about it, like should you be buying an esrog with a pitum that maybe how do you know for sure that the pitum didn't fall off after it was cut? It didn't break off. It wasn't dropped. How do you really know? Okay, there you could tell a little, like it would get black, it would get the cut, the way it's cut, it should be, there's a certain dip in it. There's certain signs that you could maybe tell. And if you buy it from a trustworthy esrog dealer, not someone who's just trying to make extra money, maybe someone who's known for his righteousness, there could be you could, these type of situations, you could, if you have someone you trust, it's one thing, but otherwise, some people are machmir to only buy an esrog with a pitum, so they don't have any shilas that maybe it actually came off. Anyway, so but the pitum is this is our Gemara, our Mishnah talked about if the pitum came off, and this is the topic of a lot of discussion in Shulchan Aruch because it is a very practical thing. I've seen many times in esrog it happens all the time that esrogim, the pitums fall off and break off and so on. And again, the point is that it's broken off or fell off after after the whatchamacallit, the esrog was harvested from the tree. Okay, so Jeffrey, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm afraid that the word is not being heard correctly, and that David may have heard you say a different letter. So please spell the word that is used in the Gemara to make sure that David is not thinking it's a different letter.
What letter would make a difference?
It sounded like he was saying nif with an F and not nit with a T.
No. Nun, tough, lamed, hey.
Yeah.
I mean, tess.
Yes,
Nun, tess, lamed, hey. Is the word nitla related to nitl nach?
No. Okay, so so this is
nitl means nothing. Nitl nach, no. So removed in nothing.
One is Yiddish, one is Hebrew.
Rabbi?
Okay. Yes, Moshe.
What about a split embryo, an etrog that one has a pitum on it and the other one doesn't? In other words, it's a twin. It's like it hasn't separated completely.
Yeah, we mentioned that a twin esrog could be puzzle. That yes, I remember that it's puzzle. So can't use it anyway. Okay, so getting back to our discussion, so what happens when you have this esrog that is missing its pitum on the other days of Sukkot? So the thing is that if it's a problem of chaser, so then you could get away with it on the other days of Sukkot. If it's a problem of hadar, there are leniencies that hadar, there are opinions that hadar only applies on the first day also. So if it's a problem of hadar, you have what to rely on, that it's only applicable on the first day and not on the other days of Sukkot. So that seems to be the Mishnah Berurah brings this leniency, but then he says the problem maybe you shouldn't make a bracha. He says only if you have another. He says yesh mefakvakin. Some question the bracha. He says that you could make a bracha, but some are mefakvik, some question this, and he says that if you include another another type of a suffix bazeh, if you have an additional suffix in this imnitla pitmasai, then for sure you could make a bracha on the other days. So he wants to basically wants you to find an additional heter. So seemingly there could be another heter, and that would be Mordechai's case. How about if you glue the pitum back? So if you glue it back, it's called chaser? So it seems like the Paiskim all say that's a problem. It's still chaser. On the first day of Sukkot, you still can't use it because it's not called a lakicha tama, even though it looks good, but you can't say this is a complete esrog. It's not a complete esrog. It's an esrog, and you attached another pitum to it. How about it also if you stick a little a needle in it, and of course a short needle, you stick it halfway in, and you have the pitum stuck into the needle. So the needle, so now you have it. It seems like it would work. I don't know about the glue. I've never tried glue, like super glue to a pitum, but this might be a better option. You have let's say you cut a needle in half, and because I think a regular sized needle could be problematic. It might go all the way deep into the esrog. But let's say you cut a needle in half, stick a millimeter into the esrog, and a millimeter into the pitum sticks into the other millimeter. So now you've got a esrog with a pitum. So the question is, so chaser you don't have, but it's the other day. It's the final days of Sukkot, so you don't have to worry about chaser, but you do have to worry about hadar. Beautiful. Now there are opinions that say hadar is not a problem on the other days of Sukkot. So those opinions are also fine. But what about the opinions that say hadar is a problem, like Rashi, all the common understanding in the Gemara, the commentaries they seem to be holding that the hadar is a problem on the other days of Sukkot. So according to those opinions, you could say that this might be considered hadar. It's beautiful. Oh, it's not attached. It's attached. It's not naturally attached. Maybe this isn't a problem. So this issue where we might be able to consider it hadar, together with all the other leniencies, hadar is not a problem on the other days. Chaser is not a problem on the other days. This itself might be considered hadar. So now you have enough to rely on to be able to use and even make a bracha. This would be room for leniency. So again, on to say that this would work on the first day of Sukkot is a problem, is a big problem, because chaser, to say that it would seem that it's considered a chaser, which is invalid on the first day of Sukkot. But to permit it on the other days of Sukkot, that would be okay. All right, so the one thing that we are leaving a little up in the air is the second day of Sukkot. Maybe we'll talk a little more about that another time. In the meantime, let's look our Gemara that we learned with the Nidla Pitmasai and Buchnasai. I did want to mention a very important Taisvis over here. Taisvis brings the 4 interpretations to the pitum falling off and the ukets falling off. We learned 2 interpretations. Rashi had brought, and I even did Rashi inside. We saw 2 important interpretations. Rashi brought Rabbeinu Yaakov and Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi. Rashi brought. Now again, let's review. Let's think of this Gemara again. That we're talking about that the pitum fell off. The Mishnah says invalid. The ukets, the stem falls off, valid. Where is the pitum? Where is the ukets? The Rashi brought from the Rabbeinu Yaakov that the ukets and the pitum is similar to what we understood. The simple understanding that the top of the esrog is called the pitum, and the Gemara here mentions it's called buchna, a pestle, and that Rashi says fits
Oh.
very well. That's the pitum. It's similar to a pestle. It's like a long, narrow type of thing. Interesting. Rashi used the word chad, which is normally means sharp, but it must mean narrow, or the fact that it's narrow, maybe you could call it chad. But it's a long, narrow type of thing, and that's what a pestle looks like. Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi learns different than we normally would think, but keep in mind that this is an important view. Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi.
Bedroom?
Yes.
Okay.
Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi, and I want to mention this because maybe there's room for leniency. I'll have to look it up in Shulchan Aruch. Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi says, you know where the pitum is? The pitum is on the bottom of the esrog. Exactly where the yukitz is. And the pitum is the stem part that's inside the indention in the esrog. The ukitz, the stem, is outside the esrog. The pitum is in the airspace of the esrog. That's the way Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi learns. Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi. Now, the reason he seems to learn that way, I think, is based on the fact that the Gemara says that it's similar to a pestle. Now, if you think of a pestle inside the mortar, there's that very similar to that is a stem that enters into the esrog. The stem part that goes into the indention of the esrog is perfectly example of the pestle inside the mortar. So he's learning that that's what the meaning is. The Mishnah says the pitum falls off. You know what it means? It means the bottom stem fell off from the inside of that's the buchna, that's the pestle, that falls off. Now, what does he hold? This is the important part of it. Now, what does he hold if the pitum falls off on the top? The understanding is, that's fine. That's not part of the esrog. That's a little flower on the top or something. That's not the stem. This part is part of the gufa esrog. This is part of the indention in the esrog. This is the airspace of the esrog. This is important. The thing on top is going to be kosher. That's quite an important view to know, because according to that, there might be a leniency on the first day. What do you do if you don't have another esrog and it doesn't have a pitum? Pitum fell off. It would seem that you have an opinion to rely on, maybe. We'll have to look it up in Shulchan Aruch. They bring this down. But Rabbeinu Yitzchok Halevi would hold that this is kosher. Now, Tosfos brings two more interpretations. Tosfos says Rashi's problem. He says Rashi doesn't like this pshat because he says, where do you find pitum and ukitz next to each other? It's not shlematzinu b'chol makom pitma ukitz. Where do you find the pitum and some have the wording in Rashi, pitum v'ukitz b'makom echad. Where do you find the pitum and the ukitz at one place? Or where do you find the pitum is the ukitz? Different original wordings of Rashi. That pitum is in the place of the ukitz. So Tosfos says this is not a problem. See, Tosfos brings Rashi and this bottom Tosfos, and then it continues on the next page, and he says huksha bekuntris on the top of 36a. Tosfos says we don't find anywhere that the pitba is by the stem is the stem, is the ukitz. And he says that Rabbeinu Tam says that's not true. You do find it. You find it in the laws of a woman becoming mature. When does a girl become mature? So there are terms used about the age of either Nairus or Boigeres, different opinions of Rashi and Tosfos in the Gemara Nida. There, if it's referring to the Naira, or Boigeres, but at certain age that a girl matures to be responsible and mitzvahs and so on, and certain laws that apply, different laws of Nidarim apply, and between Naira and Boigeres, and different rules. But bottom line is that that the Gemara there mentions that it's a certain sign by a girl near her nipple of if it's called a pitum, it's called a ukitz, right near each other. And so Taisa says, you see, there is such a concept that the ukitz and the pitum could be right next to each other, and the terminology there seems to be based on the esrog. In other words, it's using that same terminology. And so Taisa says, and he basically brings two more interpretations to our Gemara. Why is it so important to know it? Because this is the basis of the pitum, the laws of pitum, which are important for esrog. And so Taisa says that Taisus brings a third interpretation that he comes up with, that he basically wants to say that the chaitim, the ukitz, and the pitum are all in the same top area of the esrog. So he wants to say, not like this other opinion that they're all on the bottom, that the pitum and the ukitz are on the bottom of the esrog. He brings a third opinion that he comes up with, that if it's using these three terms, pitum, ukitz, and chaitim, he says it must be that they're all next to each other. And if the chaitim was what we said is on the top part of the esrog, then the ukitz and the pitum must also be on the top part of the esrog. And he says, what would the ukitz and the chaitim and the pitum be? So he says that the ukitz, there's the Mishnah had said ukitz is kosher and pitum is not valid. What does it mean? So Taisa says that nitla pitbasa is the buchna, that's the pestle. That means that when the pitum falls off, part of the esrog cracked off with the pitum, with the thing on top. So you have the protrusion from the top. The pitum is when it breaks off with a little of the esrog, with a little of the esrog. That's what it means. The pestle goes into the mortar, so it means it breaks off the pitum part. That it falls off is invalid. That's if part of that part of it broke off with where it's attached to the esrog, and you have a little hole in the esrog. And so that's the way that's the way Taisus gives this third interpretation, and the ukitz would be on top of that, and it's called that's called the stem. The stem doesn't necessarily mean what's attached to the root of the tree, to the branches of the tree. That's also called the stem. It sticks out. The pitum is the lower part. And he says it fits very well with the case of a female by her, when she becomes her adulthood, it's similar to that, because there's the dad, the nipple, and then there's the area below the nipple that would be called the pitum, and so that's what that fits the explanation here by the esrog, that it's the area below what protrudes. That would be called. Make sure that I have it. The pitum. I'm not seeing anything yet. Hold on. The final interpretation of Taisvis is the Rabbeinu Hananel, and he says that he brings that it's when the Gemara says nitla buchnasoi, it's adding something to, it's adding a halacha to what we know already. What do I mean? That the buchna that the Gemara is saying is that the pitum, there's the pitum and there's the buchna. The pitum is on the top, the pestle is on the bottom. In Reb Yitzchok ben Elazar, who says that the buchnasai, he's adding on to the Mishnah in saying that not only when the pitum falls off is it a problem, but also when the area that's part of the airspace of the esrog, when that falls off, it's also a problem. If we look in Rabbeinu Hananel, many of you probably have Rabbeinu Hananel. So it says, we have it on the side here. It's really on page 36a where he goes through this whole thing, and he says it's the dad of the chaitim is like the pitma of the dad. He brings a source that nidla b'chmasai is the kotza ha'etz anosin be'esrog going buchna, the end of the tree that's inside the esrog. And he says he brings a source in Trefus that it's the term used over there is part of the thigh bone where something is sticking into the bones stick into each other, and if it's dislodged from its place, so that's the term is buchna. That the buchna means the pestle inside the mortar, and when the term over there is when it's dislodged. It's the pestle is slipped out of its mortar. It's out of its place. So he says. So the thing is that he says that it's considered chaser. If the buchna is still there in the mortar, and that's and on top of that is what was cut off, then it's kosher. That's nittel uktzai. The Mishnah says uktzai is kosher if the stem comes off, but if the inner part that's touching the esrog, we're afraid a little of the esrog comes off because you took out the pestle part that's inside the mortar. We're afraid a little of the pestle, a little of the actual esrog came off, and that's considered chaser. It's considered invalid. Yeah, seemingly it's chaser. That's the problem. So he wants to say, like a new pshat in the Gemara, that buchna that the Gemara says is not explaining the Mishnah, it's adding on to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says this is invalid and this is valid. Comes Rabbi Yitzchok ben Elazar, and he says, and also buchna is also invalid. Nidla b'chnasa is the same law. Nidla b'dmazai is a nidla b'chnasa. He's not translating it. He's saying there's additional problem. So what comes out is that you got to be careful on the bottom of the esrog that it should still have its stem. Still have its stem. How far to go out? That's another topic of discussion. But at least it has its stem. Make sure that it has the stem. If the whole stem falls out, that's a problem. And I believe the halacha brings down in Shulchan Aruch they bring down this view of the Rabbeinu Hananel. Okay, so anyway, so that translates the Gemara a little differently. Interesting that it adds a new meaning to the Gemara. So that's important for us to know. And now the Gemara. Let's move forward to where we learned yesterday. Okay, so we're really on 36b, and we spoke about the these different types of issues with the sregim. It's black like a kushi, and we spoke about the size of the esrog, and then on 36b, we mentioned about an esrog that grows in a form, and then we have an esrog that was bitten by. Okay, this is the next Gemara. All right, let's start at the new Gemara. The new Gemara is on 36b, where we have an esrog that is bit by an achbar, by a mouse. So, what's the law of such an esrog? It's bit by a mouse. Itmar. We are on 36b, 6 lines, 5 lines from the top of the page. 5 lines from the top of the page, 36b. Itmar, it was said. Esrog shenakbu achbarim. An esrog that was, nakbu means pierced, by mice, which basically means they bit at it. And Amar Rav says, Ein zeh hodar. This is not beautiful. Not beautiful. It's ruined. Now, keep in mind that we learned already about an esrog. The truth is, I should mention this. It's very important. On 36a, we talked about an esrog that has holes, that has it's chaser. And Nikev was the case. Nikev means it's pierced. And the Mishnah had said that if it's pierced and it's missing something, the Mishnah had said 34 on 34b. The Mishnah had said that if it's pierced and it's missing something, Nikev v'chaser kolshu a little, it's invalid. And if it's not missing anything, it's kosher. Right? You remember that Mishnah? Okay. The Gemara had said, it mentioned this idea that if there's a nikev that's goes all the way through, and then there's a nikev that doesn't go all the way through. If it goes all the way through, even a drop, even if it's tiny, it's a tiny hole, it goes all the way through, it's invalid. If it's einoi mafulish, if it doesn't go all the way through, the size is like a coin, an isar. That's the Gemara on 36a. That we learned. And there are 2 opinions as to how to understand that Gemara. We learned the simple pshat. There is also a Ravid's pshat that I wanted to mention. The simple pshat that we learned is that there's 3 ways of invalidating an esrog. If it's missing something, you made a hole and you removed something from the esrog, that's one invalidation. The Gemara says there's also an invalidation, ula bar chinana. He says there's also an invalidation if you make a hole all the way through it. If you put a needle all the way through, that's also a problem. That's considered it's an issue of nikev. Is it missing anything? No, but it's considered like it. It's similar to nikev. It's missing something. What about if you pierce it with a peg? Is the size of an isar a coin? Is it missing anything? No, but it's going to be invalid as well. It's too big of a hole. You didn't remove anything from it. You pierced something into it. You made that size, isar size, a coin, a certain coin. That is also going to be invalid. That is one way of learning the Gemara. Again, so it comes out that there's 3 ways of ruining an esrog. Even a needle doesn't remove anything, just goes through it, through and through, invalid. Isar, your peg goes in it, invalid if it's the size of an isar. You take a tiny dot from the esrog, not from the skin, from inside the flesh, from the flesh of the esrog, also invalid. That's our Mishnah. Okay, so those are the 3 cases. That's one way of learning the Gemara. The other way of learning the Gemara is the Mishnah says it's invalid if it's missing something. What is called missing something? So one opinion is it has to be missing something when you make a hole all the way through it. Then it's a problem. Or if it's missing something when you make a big hole, even though it doesn't go all the way through it, it's missing something. What happens if you make a small hole and it doesn't go all the way through it, but it's missing something? Kosher. This is the Ravid's view. It's kosher. If it's missing, it's going to be kosher. But the Mishnah says it's not kosher. Yeah, the Mishnah is talking about a case where it goes all the way through. Then if it's missing a drop, it's invalid. That's when it's that's when it's invalid if it goes all the way through. Or in a case where you make a big hole and it's missing something, then it's invalid. it's considered invalid in both of these cases. But the if it's big enough, but if it's just missing and it doesn't fit any of the other criteria, then it will be considered valid. So, in other words, the opinion of Ula Bar Chinana is pretty much explaining the wording in the Mishnah that says that it's chaser. What does it mean that it's chaser? That's the this is the understanding of the Ravid. The way he explains it seems to be he's emphasizing that the Mishnah's case is a case of Isar. In that case, if it's missing something, then it's going to be invalid. Nikev Mafulish Mashu is similar to such a case. Nikev Nekav Mafulish is B'mashu, and She'ena Mafulish is B'ki'isar. In that case, it's missing, that's a problem. If it's less than that, it's not a problem. So that would be the understanding of the Ravid. What comes out from that is that if your esrog is missing something, there is a lenient view. Most issues where an esrog is missing something is not going to be the size of a isar, and it's not going to be a hole that goes through and through. So you're not going to have this type of a problem. So according to the Ravid, you have a nice leniency here.
Yeah. Yes.
Truth is, I would like. Okay, we don't have much time. In any event, now comes the next Gemara here. Okay, let's just go back to the next Gemara. So we're learning about this esrog. It's missing something because the achbar ate it, and the din is that Rav says this is a problem. It's called not hadar. Gemara asks a question. This is a funny question. It says, "Eini v'had Rabbi Chanina metabel bay." Rabbi Chanina used to dip his esrog v'nafik bay and be yaitze. He would fulfill the mitzvah. Now, what does it mean he would dip it? So the meaning is he would dip it and eat it. He would dip it into some, something tasty, and then he would take a bite out of his esrog, and then he would say the bracha on it. Okay, then he would go and do the bench. So he would take a bite out of it, and then he would go and he would eat part of it. Now, he would say a bracha, bench esrog. He would say a bracha on eating it, of course, and then he would say a bracha on shaking it. So you see that there's not a problem. What's a problem if an achbar eats a little? It's not a problem. Chanina used to do this. No problem. It's not a problem. Chanina did it. So the Gemara says, what do you mean, Lord Chanina kasha masnisen? How does he learn the Mishnah? The Mishnah says if it's missing, it's going to be invalid. How does he fit? So the Gemara says, according to the Mishnah, it's good the Mishnah. It's not a question on Rabbi Chanina, because you could say, kan b'yemtiv rishon, kan b'yemtiv sheni. One is talking about the first day, and one is talking about the other days. What day did he take a bite out of it? Not on the first day. On the first day, you have the mitzvah, so it needs to be complete. On the other days, and the Mishnah says that if it's missing something, it's not complete. It's not a lakicha tama. It's not a complete esrog. It's a problem. The other days of Sukkot, we've already explained that if chaser is not an issue, on the other days of Sukkot, and therefore you could get away with it. So Reb Chanina got away with it. He would take a bite out of it. That wasn't the first day of Sukkot. It was the other days of Sukkot. He got away with it. Took a bite, and then he said, "Okay, now I'll bench. It's chaser. It's missing something. It's okay. It's kosher. See, it's not the first day." The Gemara says, "Ella, but l'Rav kasha." But according to Rav, this is a problem. Because what did Rav say? Rav says it's a problem of hadar. It's a problem of beauty. And that should mean that it's not valid for any days. How does Rav Chanina make a bracha on shaking the lulav and esrog if he takes a bite out of it and it's not going to be hadar, and that would be a problem of all the days? So the Gemara answers, Amalach Rav. Rav can answer Shani Achbarim de Meisi, that mice are considered disgusting, and because it's considered disgusting, therefore that would be invalid all the days. But if it was just you biting it, it's not a problem. And this is a big problem according to the Rambam's view. The Rambam holds that hadar is also only a problem on the first day. So what's the question? Ella l'Rav kasha. What's the kasha? Rav says it's not hadar. What do you mean? Rav is saying that esrog is that an achbar bites it. It's not hadar. It's invalid. Seemingly, that's only applicable on the first day. If it's only applicable on the first day, according to the Rambam, hadar is only an issue on the first day, so it's not a problem. Reb Chanina ate it on the other days. Why is it such a contradiction to Rav? It's a kasha. So the Gemara, so the way the Rambam has to learn it is that Rav holds hadar is an issue on all the days. We don't hold that. That's not the halacha. But Rav held hadar was a problem on all the days, and therefore for Rav it's a problem because Rav seems to be saying that it's that you're not allowed to use it ever, and then we see Reb Chanina did. So the Gemara answers that Shani Achbarim de Meisi, that the achbar, the mouse is different because it's disgusting. And then the Gemara says Ika da Amri Amar Rav. Some say that Rav said that Amar Rav. Rav says Zeh hadar, that esrog that the mice ate is considered hadar. It's kosher. Some say that the Rav said it the opposite. Rav said this kosher. Reb Chanina matba babanafik. Reb Chanina would bite it and it would be kosher, and therefore Rav said, yeah, no problem. It's okay. Reb Chanina. So the Gemara says Reb Chanina kasha masnisin, and then the Gemara asks Reb Chanina. The Mishnah seems to be a contradiction to what you did, Reb Chanina, because really the law is that it has to be complete, and you took a bite out of it, and then you're making a bracha on it. And you're shaking lulav and esrog with it, and you took a bite out of it. The Mishnah says it can't be chaser. The Gemara's answer is like kasha. There's not a question. Kan be yom tov rishon, kan be yom tov sheni. There's a difference between the yom tov rishon and yom tov sheni. That he didn't do this on the first day. The first day it has to be complete. The other days, it seems pretty clear from here that you don't have to be machmir on the other days to be worried, concerned about if it's chaser, if it's missing something on the other days. The issue that is not an issue. The fact that it's missing is not a problem. What about hadar? Beautiful. This is not an issue. It's not a problem of hadar. Missing something. If the pitum falls off, that could be a problem of hadar. So he didn't take a bite of. He didn't bite off the pitum, because the pitum we learned could be a problem of hadar. That could be an issue. But he took a bite from the side. Not a problem of hadar. And his mouth is not as disgusting as a mouse, according to the first opinion. And therefore, a mouse bit, according to the first version, that would be a problem. But he bit it. It's okay. It's not a problem. And it's he didn't do it on the first day. He did it on the other days. The halacha is chaser is kosher. Now, the question on this Gemara is that the right way to shake a lulav and esrog You just take a bite out of it and you could use it. It might be kosher. Is that allowed in the first place? Can you do such a thing? Is that appropriate to just take a bite out of and the esrog before you shake it? Like, shouldn't you try to use a more perfect esrog? It's kosher on the other days of Sukkot, but does that mean there's no inyan of you don't have to try to get a better one? And this is a topic of argument between the commentaries. The commentaries debate about this because the Gemara implies that it's acceptable. Rebbe Hanina did it in the first place. So that would be a source that you can do this as a lichatchila. He took a bite out of it and then he shook. He didn't shake before. Sounds from the story that this is acceptable. It's not a problem. There's no mitzvah of having a complete esrog on the other days. Take a bite out of it and do it. I'm not advising it. There is another opinion. The other opinion says no, this is not advisable. But anyway, maybe we'll talk more tomorrow. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.